The massive ships appeared without warning above Earth's solar system like dark clouds blocking out the sun. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Coalition ship Liberty, watching his screens fill with enemy contacts. Each alien vessel was larger than Earth's biggest city, and there were hundreds of them arranged in perfect formation around a ship so enormous it looked like a small moon. Jake had been in space combat for 15 years, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The alien fleet hung motionless in space 3 million miles from Earth, broadcasting the same message over and over in perfect English. Surrender now, or face complete destruction. The voice was cold and mechanical, but somehow Jake could hear the arrogance behind each word. "Sir, we're getting readings from the big ship," reported Lieutenant Amy Foster from her station. "The energy signatures are off the charts. Whatever they have on that thing, it's powerful enough to crack a planet in half." Jake nodded grimly as he studied the tactical display. Earth's entire defense fleet consisted of 12 ships, and they looked like toys compared to what they faced. The alien commander had identified himself as Admiral Vexstar of something called the Zephyrian Empire, and he seemed very confident that humanity would surrender without a fight. The communication channels crackled to life again with the alien Admiral's voice. "Humans of the third planet, we give you one demonstration of our power before you make your final choice. Observe what happens to those who resist the Zephyrian Empire." Jake watched in horror as the moon-sized ship began to glow. With a brilliant white light, energy coursed along its hull in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Massive weapon arrays emerged from hidden ports, and all of them focused on a single target. Jupiter's moon Io hung unsuspecting in space, completely unaware it was about to become an example. The alien weapon, called the Stellar Annihilator, charged up slowly and deliberately, like a predator playing with its prey. Jake could see the energy building through his ship's sensors, and the numbers kept climbing higher than anything he had ever witnessed. This wasn't just a weapon, it was a force of nature contained in metal and alien technology. "All ships pull back to minimum safe distance," Jake ordered over the fleet communication system. "Whatever they're about to do, we don't want to be anywhere near the blast radius." The Earth ships retreated, but kept their sensors trained on the alien demonstration. Scientists around the world were watching through telescopes and space-based cameras, recording every detail of what was about to happen. If humanity was going to die, they wanted to understand how their killers had achieved such power. Admiral Vexstar's voice echoed across space one final time before the firing sequence began. "This moon will serve as your lesson, human creatures. See how easily we erase worlds that displease us." The Stellar Annihilator fired. The beam of energy that lanced out from the alien weapon was invisible to the naked eye, but its effects were immediate and terrifying. Io simply ceased to exist. There was no explosion, no dramatic flash of light, just a brief shimmer in space, and then nothing remained where the moon had been orbiting Jupiter for billions of years. Jake stared at his sensors, trying to process what he had just witnessed. The readings showed empty space where Io should have been, as if the moon had never existed at all. Even the debris field was gone, erased so completely that not a single rock remained to mark where an entire world had been moments before. "Dear God," whispered Amy Foster. "They didn't just destroy it, they completely eliminated it from existence." The implications hit Jake like a physical blow to the stomach. If the aliens could do this to a moon, what chance did Earth have against such overwhelming firepower? He thought about his wife Carol and their 2 children waiting for him back home, completely unaware that their world might end in the next few days. Admiral Vexstar's message resumed with even more confidence than before. "You have witnessed the fate that awaits all who oppose us. We are generous enough to offer you 72 Earth hours to consider surrender. Use this time wisely, for it is all the time you have left." The alien fleet settled into a defensive formation, just outside Earth's orbital space, close enough to strike at any moment, but far enough away to avoid any desperate counterattack. Jake knew his small fleet posed no real threat to ships that could erase moons, but the aliens seemed content to wait and let fear do their work for them. Reports flooded in from Earth as governments around the world tried to process what they had seen. The United Nations called an emergency session, while military leaders demanded immediate surrender talks. Panic spread through major cities as people realized their entire planet was now a target for weapons beyond their comprehension. Jake opened a secure channel to Earth Defense Command, hoping for orders that might give his fleet some purpose in the coming disaster. The response was exactly what he expected. All ships were to maintain position and monitor the alien fleet, while political leaders decided humanity's fate through negotiation rather than warfare. Meanwhile, at Lincoln High School in Nebraska, physics teacher Lisa Campbell was trying to maintain some sense of normalcy despite the global crisis unfolding overhead. Her advanced physics class had gathered around the television in the corner of the room, watching news coverage of the alien demonstration with growing fear and fascination. "Miss Campbell, what are we supposed to do now?" asked student Alex Rodriguez as images of the destroyed moon filled the screen. "How do you fight something that can erase entire worlds like they never existed?" Lisa looked at her students and saw the same fear she felt reflected in their young faces. Alex was brilliant for his age, with an intuitive understanding of physics. That impressed even college professors. Maya Johnson sat beside him, equally gifted, but focused more on electronics and computer systems. Danny Carter covered the whiteboard with equations whenever he got nervous, and right now he was scribbling calculations at a frantic pace. "I don't know, Alex," Lisa admitted quietly. "But giving up has never solved any problem in the history of science." She walked to the front of the classroom and looked out the window at the clear Nebraska sky. Somewhere up there beyond the blue atmosphere, alien ships waited with weapons that could eliminate her entire world. But down here in this simple classroom filled with basic science equipment, she felt something stir that had nothing to do with fear. "Class dismissed," she announced suddenly. "Go home to your families." But as the students gathered their books to leave, Alex Rodriguez stopped at the door. "Miss Campbell, what if there was something we could do? What if the answer isn't giving up or fighting, but something else entirely?" Lisa Campbell looked at her brightest student, and then at the collection of simple laboratory equipment that filled her classroom: magnets and copper wire, capacitors and batteries, oscilloscopes and function generators, all basic tools for teaching physics to teenagers, but in the right hands, perhaps something more. "Then we'd better get started," she said, closing the classroom door. Lisa Campbell locked the classroom door and turned to face the handful of students who had chosen to stay behind. Alex Rodriguez sat at his desk with his laptop open while Maya Johnson worked furiously on her tablet, trying to access restricted government databases. Danny Carter had already filled half the whiteboard with calculations that looked more advanced than most college courses. "Okay, let me be clear about something," Lisa said, walking to the front of the room. "What we're talking about here is completely insane. 3 kids and a high school teacher cannot build a weapon capable of stopping aliens who just erased a moon from existence." Alex looked up from his computer screen with determination in his young eyes. "But Miss Campbell, what if we're not trying to build a weapon to destroy their ships? What if we're trying to build something that can stop their weapon from working?" Maya nodded enthusiastically as data streamed across her tablet. "I've been analyzing the video footage of their demonstration, and there's something weird about how their weapon works. Look at these energy readings from the news feeds." She connected her tablet to the classroom's smartboard and displayed a series of waveforms that she had extracted from the television coverage. The patterns showed regular oscillations in the alien weapon's energy output during the charging phase before it fired at Jupiter's moon. "See this frequency pattern?" Maya pointed to specific peaks in the waveform data. "Their weapon operates on a very specific resonance frequency. It's like tuning a guitar string to exactly the right note, except this note can destroy planets." "Danny," Carter stopped writing on the whiteboard and turned around to study Maya's analysis. "If their weapon uses resonance to focus energy, then theoretically it might be vulnerable to interference at the same frequency, like when 2 sound waves cancel each other out." Lisa felt her heart racing as she began to understand what her students were proposing. "You're talking about creating some kind of electromagnetic interference that could disrupt their weapon during the firing sequence." "Exactly," Alex said, pulling up more data on his laptop. "I've been running simulations based on the energy readings, and if we could generate a pulse at exactly the right frequency and amplitude, we might be able to cause their own weapon to malfunction." The idea was brilliant in its simplicity, but Lisa knew the practical problems were enormous. Even if the theory is sound, we would need massive amounts of power and precision electronics that we don't have access to. We're talking about interfering with a weapon that can eliminate entire moons. Maya grinned and held up her smartphone. My dad works at the power plant about 20 miles from here. And remember what Mr. Peterson taught us in electronics class about building capacitors and electromagnetic coils? Lisa looked around her classroom at the basic science equipment she used to teach physics to teenagers. Copper wire coiled around, iron cores. Batteries connected in series to increase voltage. Simple capacitors made from aluminum foil and plastic sheeting. All the components needed to create powerful electromagnetic fields, if they could scale everything up to the right size. We'd need to calculate the exact frequency and timing, Danny said, returning to his equations on the whiteboard. Plus, we'd have to figure out how to aim our signal at their ship when it's charging up to fire. Alex was already working on that problem, pulling up orbital mechanics software on his laptop. The aliens positioned their fleet in a predictable pattern. If we time everything right, we should be able to target their main weapon during the next charging cycle. Lisa picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she was looking for. Dr. Ben Torres had been her college roommate and now worked as a physicist at NORAD, analyzing potential threats to national security. If anyone would listen to their crazy idea, it would be Ben. The call connected after several rings, and Ben's familiar voice came through the speaker. Lisa, what are you doing calling me during the biggest crisis in human history? Please tell me. You're somewhere safe. Ben, I need you to look at some calculations that my students have been working on. I'm going to send you some data, and I want you to tell me if we're completely insane or if this might actually work. There was a long pause before Ben responded. Lisa, you're a high school teacher, not a weapons designer. Whatever you're thinking about doing, please just evacuate with everyone else and let the military handle this situation. The military doesn't have any solutions, Ben. We just watched aliens erase a moon like it was nothing, and now they're giving us 3 days to surrender. If there's even a chance that we can help, we have to try. Maya had finished uploading their analysis to a secure file-sharing system, and Alex was adding his simulation results to the package. Danny took photos of his calculations and included those as well. Within minutes, they had assembled a complete technical proposal for disrupting alien technology using modified high school science equipment. I'm sending you everything now, Lisa told Ben. Just look at the data and tell me what you think. If we're wrong, then humanity surrenders in 3 days anyway. If we're right, then maybe we have a chance. Ben was quiet for a long moment after receiving the files. Lisa could hear him typing and clicking through the data they had sent. Lisa, where did these calculations come from? Some of this analysis is graduate-level physics, and the frequency calculations look professionally done. My students, Lisa replied simply. Alex Rodriguez, Maya Johnson, and Danny Carter. They figured this out in the last 2 hours using nothing but news footage and basic physics principles. Give me 30 minutes to run this through our computers, Ben said with new respect in his voice. If their math checks out, then we need to talk to some people in Washington immediately. While they waited for Ben's response, the students continued refining their calculations and designing the actual device they would need to build. The concept was straightforward, but the engineering challenges were enormous. They would need copper wire measured in miles, not feet, capacitors the size of car batteries instead of coin cells, and enough electrical power to run a small city. Maya called her father Joe Johnson, who was the chief electrical engineer at the local power plant. Dad, I need to ask you about something really important, and I need you to not think I'm crazy until you hear the whole thing. Joe listened patiently as his daughter explained their plan to build an electromagnetic pulse device capable of interfering with alien weapons. To his credit, he didn't immediately dismiss the idea as teenage fantasy, but instead asked detailed questions about power requirements and electrical safety. Honey, what you're describing would require the entire output of our power plant for several minutes, Joe said carefully. Plus, we'd need massive conductors to handle that kind of current without melting. Even if the physics works, the engineering might be impossible. Danny looked up from his calculations with excitement. Mr. Johnson, what if we didn't try to generate all that power at once? What if we stored energy in stages using multiple capacitor banks and then released everything in one coordinated pulse? Lisa's phone rang with a call from Ben Torres. Lisa, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is your students' calculations are absolutely correct, and this plan could theoretically work. The bad news is that every physicist at NORAD thinks, "You're all going to get yourselves killed trying to build this thing. So you'll help us," Lisa asked. "I'll do better than that," Ben replied. "I'm calling the Pentagon right now to tell them that 3 teenagers in Nebraska might have found the solution to our alien problem. If you can actually build this device, then you'll have saved the world with what amounts to a science fair project." Outside, the classroom window, the sun was setting over the Nebraska plains. In space above Earth, the alien fleet waited patiently for humanity's surrender, while counting down the hours until they could demonstrate their power again. But inside a small high school classroom, 4 people worked frantically on plans that might change the course of galactic history using nothing more than determination and basic scientific principles. The news trucks arrived at Lincoln High School before dawn on the second day, bringing reporters from around the world who wanted to document what many believed would be humanity's last desperate attempt to avoid extinction. Lisa Campbell stood in the school parking lot watching crews set up satellite dishes while military vehicles rolled in to secure the area. Colonel Steve Parker climbed out of an armored truck and walked directly to Lisa with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity on his weathered face. "Ms. Campbell, I've been briefed on your student's plan by Dr. Torres and some very excited physicists at the Pentagon. I have to ask, are you people completely insane or the most brilliant humans alive?" "Probably both," Lisa replied honestly. "But we're the only plan anyone has right now, so I suggest you help us make this work." Inside the school gymnasium, Alex Rodriguez stood on a ladder wrapping copper wire around a massive iron core that the maintenance crew had salvaged from an old transformer. Maya Johnson sat at a folding table surrounded by car batteries that volunteers had donated from every auto parts store within 50 miles. Danny Carter covered every available wall space with calculations, checking and rechecking their frequency equations. The device had grown far beyond anything Lisa had imagined when they started. What began as a desktop experiment now filled half the gymnasium and required a team of electricians to wire safely. Joe Johnson had taken leave from the power plant to coordinate the electrical work, while his colleagues figured out how to channel the facility's entire output through their improvised weapon. "The theory is sound, but the engineering is giving me nightmares," Joe told Colonel Parker as they toured the construction site. "We're basically building the world's largest Tesla coil using high school science equipment and hoping it doesn't electrocute everyone in a 50-mile radius." Maya looked up from her battery bank calculations with grease smudged across her cheek. "Dad, the safety margins are all within acceptable limits as long as we keep everyone behind the shielding barriers during the test firing." Dr. Ben Torres arrived by military helicopter carrying cases of precision electronics that the students had requested for their targeting system. "I brought everything I could find at NORAD, including some experimental frequency generators that should give you better control over your pulse timing." Alex climbed down from the ladder and examined the military equipment with obvious excitement. "Dr. Torres, this is perfect, but we still need a way to aim our electromagnetic pulse at the alien ship when it's charging up to fire." "About that," Ben said, opening another case filled with telescope mirrors and electronic components. "We've been tracking their fleet movements and we think we can predict when they'll position their weapon for the next demonstration." The alien fleet had been broadcasting regular updates about humanity's remaining time to surrender. Admiral Vextar seemed to enjoy taunting Earth's population with descriptions of what would happen to major cities once the deadline expired. But his messages also revealed tactical information about the Zephyrian Empire's plans for their next show of force. "They're going to target the moon," Colonel Parker explained, pointing to satellite images of the alien formation. "Our intelligence analysts believe they want to destroy something visible from Earth's surface to maximize the psychological impact of their demonstration." Danny stopped his calculations and turned around with concern written across his young face. "Colonel, if they destroy the moon, it will affect Earth's tides and climate systems. Millions of people could die even before they attack the planet directly." "Which is why we need your device to work," Parker replied grimly. "The President has authorized us to attempt your plan during their next weapon charging cycle. If it fails, then we'll have no choice but to discuss surrender terms." Maya's father returned from the power plant with troubling news about their energy requirements. "The calculations show we need almost 3 times more power than our facility can generate, even if we shut down the entire electrical grid for the surrounding counties. We'll still fall short of the minimum pulse strength. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this devastating information. Without sufficient power, their electromagnetic pulse would be too weak to interfere with the alien weapon's charging sequence. All their work and preparation would be meaningless against technology designed to destroy entire worlds. Alex sat down heavily in a folding chair and stared at the massive device they had been building. There has to be another way to amplify our signal. What if we could somehow sync with other power sources across a wider area? That's impossible, Joe Johnson said, shaking his head. The power grid wasn't designed to coordinate that kind of massive energy transfer across state lines. We'd need to physically connect our device to multiple power plants simultaneously. Danny Carter had been quietly working at one of his whiteboards during this conversation, and now he turned around with excitement building in his voice. Mr. Johnson, what if we don't try to transfer power between plants but instead synchronize multiple pulse generators across different locations? Maya jumped up from her battery calculations as she understood what Danny was suggesting. We could build smaller versions of our device at power plants in other states and coordinate them to fire simultaneously. Instead of one massive pulse, we'd create multiple pulses that combine and amplify each other. Ben Torres was already on his phone calling contacts at other military installations. I can get teams working on duplicate devices at facilities in Iowa, Kansas, and Colorado. If we synchronize everything correctly, the combined electromagnetic pulse should be strong enough to disrupt their weapon system. The next 18 hours became a frantic race against time as teams across 4 states worked to build identical copies of the Lincoln High School device. Military transport planes carried students and teachers to other locations, where they supervised construction and verified calculations. The original device served as the master controller, while the remote installations followed its timing signals. Lisa found herself coordinating between multiple work sites through secure video conferences, while Alex and Maya refined their targeting algorithms. Danny had been copied on whiteboards in gymnasium facilities across the Midwest as local physicists checked his frequency calculations. Colonel Parker established a command center in the school's main office, where he monitored both the construction progress and the alien fleet's movements. The enemy weapon is beginning its charging sequence, he announced over the communication system. All sites report readiness status immediately. Reports came in from Iowa, Kansas, and Colorado confirming that their devices were operational and synchronized with the master controller. The combined power output would be nearly 10 times what they had originally calculated, but the targeting would be much more complex with signals coming from multiple directions. Alex made final adjustments to the targeting system, while Maya monitored power levels across all 4 locations. Danny stood at his whiteboard making last-minute corrections to the firing sequence calculations. Lisa Campbell placed her hand on the master control switch that would coordinate the most desperate gamble in human history. Outside the gymnasium, windows they could see the alien fleet positioning itself for the destruction of Earth's moon. The massive weapon began gathering energy for another demonstration of Zephyrian superiority, while 4 state power grids prepared to channel their entire output through devices built from classroom science equipment. All stations report ready, Colonel Parker announced. Ms. Campbell, the decision is yours. Lisa looked at her students who had created this impossible solution from nothing more than determination and basic physics principles. For everyone we're trying to save, she said, and pressed the switch that would either save humanity or mark the end of their resistance against impossible odds. Lisa Campbell's hand hovered over the master control switch as reports flooded in from command centers across 4 states. The alien weapon continued its charging sequence high above Earth, while power plants from Nebraska to Colorado prepared to channel everything they had through devices that looked more like science fair projects than instruments of war. Lincoln High School ready, Alex Rodriguez called out from his position at the targeting computer. His young hands moved across the keyboard with steady precision, despite the enormous pressure weighing on everyone in the gymnasium. Iowa installation reports full synchronization, came the voice over the radio from Dr. Torres, who was coordinating the secondary site near Des Moines. All frequencies locked and tracking the primary signal. Maya Johnson monitored the power grid status on multiple screens, showing electrical loads across the entire Midwest region. Dad, the power companies are reporting some instability in the Iowa network, but all plants are holding steady at maximum output. Colonel Parker stood behind Lisa with his own communication headset, connecting him directly to NORAD and the Pentagon. The alien weapon has reached 60% charge level and climbing. Intelligence estimates 18 minutes until they reach firing capacity. The Zephyrian fleet hung in space like a collection of dark mountains blocking out the stars. Admiral Vextar had positioned his flagship's massive weapon array to target Earth's moon, with the same casual confidence he had shown when destroying Jupiter's satellite. The energy readings from their stellar annihilator grew stronger each minute, as exotic matter and alien technology prepared to erase another celestial body from existence. Danny Carter made final calculations on his whiteboard, checking the timing sequences one last time. Miss Campbell, based on their current charging rate, we need to fire our pulse when their weapon reaches 92% capacity. Any earlier, and we won't disrupt the energy cascade. Any later, and they'll complete their firing sequence. News. Reporter Susan Blake stood behind the safety barriers with her camera crew, documenting what might be humanity's final hour. This is Susan Blake reporting live from Lincoln High School, where a physics teacher and her students are attempting to save the world using equipment they built in their gymnasium. The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on anyone present. While governments around the world debated surrender terms and military leaders planned desperate last stands, the fate of human civilization rested in the hands of teenagers who had learned about electromagnetic fields from textbooks and YouTube videos. Lisa felt the weight of billions of lives pressing down on her shoulders as she maintained her position at the control switch. Every person on Earth was depending on calculations made by high school students and a device built from copper wire and car batteries. The rational part of her mind screamed that this couldn't possibly work against technology capable of destroying planets. 70% charge level, Alex announced, monitoring the alien weapon through their improvised telescope array. The energy patterns are holding steady and matching our predicted frequency signature. Ben Torres's voice crackled over the radio from Iowa. Lisa, we're seeing some fluctuations in our power grid, but nothing we can't handle. The synchronization systems are working perfectly and all 4 sites are locked onto the target frequency. Maya's Father Joe Johnson was splitting his attention between the power plant's main control room and the gymnasium where his daughter was about to attempt the impossible. All electrical systems show green across the board. When you give the word, we can channel the entire regional power grid through your device. The alien weapon continued its relentless charging cycle, while Earth's population held its breath. In major cities around the world, people gathered in public squares and around television screens to witness either humanity's salvation or its final defeat. Military bases went to maximum alert, even though everyone knew their weapons were useless against ships that could erase moons. Colonel Parker received an update from satellite tracking stations monitoring the alien fleet. NORAD reports the enemy weapon has shifted position slightly. They're adjusting their aim to target the center of the moon rather than its edge. Maximum psychological impact when they fire. Alex quickly recalibrated their targeting system to account for the alien weapon's movement. Targeting solution updated and locked in. Our electromagnetic pulse will hit their weapon array during the critical phase of their charging sequence. 80% charge level, Danny announced, watching the energy readings climb toward the point of no return. 12 minutes until they reach firing capacity. The gymnasium fell silent except for the hum of electrical equipment and the distant rumble of power flowing through transmission lines from across the region. Lisa could feel static electricity building in the air as massive amounts of energy prepared to discharge through their improvised weapon system. Maya checked her calculations one final time before giving Lisa a confident nod. All power systems synchronized and ready for discharge. The capacitor banks are fully charged and the targeting array is locked onto their weapon signature. Ben Torres made contact from Iowa with final confirmation from the other sites. Kansas and Colorado report ready status. All installations are synchronized and awaiting your signal. Lisa, whatever happens next, you and your students have given humanity a fighting chance. 85% charge level, Alex called out as sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air in the gymnasium. 7 minutes until optimal firing. Window. Admiral Vextar's arrogant voice echoed across space one final time as his weapon approached full power. Humans of Earth observe the fate of your moon and know that your planet will follow within hours. The Zephyrian Empire shows mercy. To none who resist our expansion across the galaxy, Colonel Parker pressed his headset closer to his ear as urgent reports came in from military tracking stations. The alien weapon is approaching critical mass. All non-essential personnel should evacuate to minimum safe distance immediately, but Lisa Campbell and her students remained at their positions, unwilling to abandon their creation at the moment of truth. They had built this device with their own hands, using principles learned in a high school classroom, and they would see their plan through to whatever end awaited them. 90% charge level, Alex announced with his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. Target acquisition confirmed and firing solution locked in. Maya's hands moved across her control panel, making final adjustments to the power distribution system. All electrical systems showing optimal performance. Dad, we're ready for maximum power transfer on your mark. Danny Carter stepped back from his whiteboard where months of advanced calculations had been compressed into a few critical equations. Miss Campbell, the mathematics all check out. If our theory is correct, their own weapon will tear their ship apart from the inside. Lisa Campbell looked around the gymnasium at the impossible device they had built from nothing more than determination and basic science equipment. Copper wire wrapped around iron cores, car batteries linked together with jumper cables, mirrors and lenses salvaged from school equipment. All of it focused on a single purpose that defied every reasonable expectation. 92% charge level, Alex said quietly. Firing window is now open. Colonel Parker's radio crackled with urgent voices from command centers around the world. All stations report ready. Ms. Campbell, the authorization is yours. Fire when ready. Lisa Campbell closed her eyes for a moment, thinking about her students who had refused to accept defeat, and her classroom where this impossible journey had begun. Then she opened her eyes and pressed the switch that would either save humanity or mark the end of their resistance against the stars. The lights went out across half the North American continent as 4 power grids discharged their entire capacity through devices that should never have worked against technology from the stars. The electromagnetic pulse that erupted from 4 locations across the American Midwest was invisible to human eyes, but its effects rippled through space at the speed of light toward the alien fleet hovering near Earth's moon. Lisa Campbell felt the gymnasium shake as enormous amounts of electrical energy discharged through their improvised weapon system, while every light bulb within 100 miles shattered from the electromagnetic overload. Alex Rodriguez watched, his targeting computer screen go dark along with every other electronic device in the building. But he had already locked their signal onto the alien weapon's charging signature. Maya Johnson's power monitoring systems died in spectacular showers of sparks, but the massive pulse had already left their makeshift transmitters and was racing toward its target in space. Admiral Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship watching Earth's moon grow larger in his targeting display as the stellar annihilator approached full charge capacity. The primitive planet below had gone mysteriously dark in several regions, but he assumed the humans were simply experiencing power failures from fear of their coming destruction. Weapon systems at 94% charge level, reported his tactical officer. All targeting solutions confirmed and ready for final firing sequence. Excellent, Admiral Vexitar replied with satisfaction. These humans will serve as a perfect example to other species who might consider resisting the Zephyrian Empire. But as his weapon system climbed toward full power, something unexpected began to happen deep within the exotic matter containment fields that gave the stellar annihilator its terrible strength. A resonance frequency identical to the weapon's own energy signature started interfering with the carefully controlled cascade reaction that focused enough power to erase planets from existence. The first sign of trouble was a slight fluctuation in the weapon's charging pattern that the alien technicians dismissed as normal variants in their exotic matter fuel systems. But the fluctuations grew stronger as the electromagnetic pulse from Earth reached the flagship and began interacting with the weapon's energy field in ways that the Zephyrians had never encountered before. Admiral, we are detecting some unusual readings from the primary weapon array, the tactical officer reported with growing concern in his voice. The containment fields are showing harmonic interference at the base frequency level, Admiral Vexistar frowned as warning lights began flashing across his bridge displays. Impossible. The humans possess no technology capable of interfering with Zephyrian weapon systems. But even as he spoke, the interference patterns grew stronger, causing the Stellar Annihilator's energy cascade to become unstable in ways that violated every law of physics the Zephyrians understood. The weapon's own power was turning against itself as resonance frequencies created feedback loops that no safety system had been designed to handle. Down in the gymnasium at Lincoln High School, Lisa Campbell and her students huddled behind their protective barriers as emergency lighting flickered on and revealed the devastation their electromagnetic pulse had caused to their own equipment. Melted copper wire hung from twisted metal frames while car batteries leaked acid across the floor from massive electrical overloads. "Did it work?" Maya Johnson asked, as smoke cleared from the remains of their impossible device. "We can't see anything with all our monitoring equipment destroyed." Colonel Parker pressed his emergency radio closer to his ear, trying to make contact with military tracking stations that still had power. "NORAD reports massive energy fluctuations from the alien flagship. Something is definitely happening up there, but we won't know the results for several more minutes." Alex Rodriguez climbed over the wreckage of their targeting computer and found a manual telescope that had survived the electromagnetic pulse. He aimed it toward the location where the alien fleet was positioned and adjusted the focus until the enemy ships came into view. "Miss Campbell, you need to see this," Alex said with wonder and disbelief in his young voice. Lisa took the telescope and looked through the eyepiece at a sight that defied everything she knew about physics and warfare. The alien flagship was coming apart like a flower blooming in reverse as internal explosions tore through its hull from bow to stern. The massive weapon that had erased Jupiter's moon was destroying itself and taking the entire ship with it in a cascade of uncontrolled energy. Admiral Vextar had just enough time to realize what was happening before his own weapon's power core breached containment and turned the cosmic destroyer into expanding debris that would drift through space for the next million years. His final transmission was intercepted by Earth's surviving communication satellites and would be studied by xenolinguists for decades to come. "Impossible," his translated voice echoed across space. "They built it from nothing." The destruction of the flagship sent shockwaves through the remaining Zephyrian fleet, as hundreds of smaller ships watched their ultimate weapon and most powerful vessel reduced to glowing fragments. Without the Stellar Annihilator to back up their threats, the alien commanders found themselves facing an enemy they had drastically underestimated. Emergency communications flooded the alien fleet's command channels as ship captains demanded explanations for how primitive humans had destroyed technology that had conquered dozens of star systems. The humans had not merely resisted Zephyrian power, they had turned it against itself using principles that seemed to violate accepted understanding of physics and engineering. Within hours, the surviving alien ships began withdrawing from Earth's solar system, broadcasting surrender offers and requests for safe passage back to their home territories. The species that had intended to enslave humanity now begged for the privilege of leaving peacefully before the terrifying humans built more weapons from their incomprehensible technology. News of the victory spread across Earth faster than the returning power grids could be restored. In cities that had been preparing for alien occupation, crowds gathered in the streets to celebrate, while governments tried to process what had actually happened in a high school gymnasium in Nebraska. President Martinez addressed the world from the White House 3 hours after the alien retreat began. "Today we learned that the greatest weapons are not always built in factories or laboratories. Sometimes they are created by teachers and students who refuse to accept defeat even when facing impossible odds." Lisa Campbell stood in the ruins of her classroom surrounded by reporters from every major news network on Earth. The woman who had been teaching basic physics to teenagers just days earlier now found herself at the center of a media storm that would reshape humanity's understanding of its place in the galaxy. "Ms. Campbell, how does it feel to have saved the world?" asked reporter Susan Blake as cameras recorded every word for posterity. Lisa looked around at her students who were trying to salvage their melted equipment and notebook calculations. "We didn't save the world. We just proved that good science and determination can overcome any challenge if you're willing to try something that everyone says is impossible." Alex Rodriguez was already sketching plans for improved versions of their electromagnetic pulse system on a new whiteboard that maintenance crews had brought to replace the ones damaged in the power surge. Maya Johnson had connected her tablet to a backup battery and was analyzing data from the alien weapons destruction to understand exactly how their interference had caused such catastrophic results. Danny Carter stood at a clean whiteboard working through equations that would help humanity understand the physics principles behind their victory. The math was complex, but the basic concept was elegantly simple. Sometimes the most sophisticated technology could be defeated by fundamental forces that any high school student could understand and manipulate. Within months, Earth's defense systems incorporated dozens of improved electromagnetic pulse generators based on the Lincoln High School design. Military engineers scaled up the basic concept while keeping the essential simplicity that had made it effective against alien technology. The story of humanity's victory became legend throughout the galaxy, as word spread that Earth's inhabitants could build planet-killing weapons from classroom supplies and teenage ingenuity. Other species began approaching human space not as conquerors, but as students eager to learn from the resourceful inhabitants of the small blue planet that had defeated the mighty Zephyrian Empire. Lisa Campbell returned to teaching physics, but her classroom now included exchange students from a dozen different worlds. Young aliens sat alongside human teenagers learning the same basic principles that had saved Earth from destruction. During her first lesson with the mixed class, she held up a simple piece of copper wire. "Who can tell me what this is?" she asked, looking around at tentacles and claws raised alongside human hands. A nervous young Zephyrian in the front row answered in carefully practiced English. "A component of mass destruction, Teacher Campbell." Lisa smiled as she had every day since returning to her classroom. "It's whatever we need it to be. That's what makes science beautiful, and that's what makes humanity special." Outside the windows of Lincoln High School, construction crews worked on humanity's first interstellar exploration ship. The vessel was being built using principles learned from a high school science project and would carry human teachers and students to the stars where they would